students, in this video we have to discuss about processing and analysis of data. As you know, after collection of the data, it has to be processed and analyzed to get a meaningful result of our research objective set. So what is processing? The data collection has to be processed or analyzed with the lay down for the purpose of at the time of developing the research plan. So this processing involves mainly four steps, that is editing, coding, classification and tabulation. The first stage is editing. It is the process of examining the collected data and ensure that there is no errors or omissions. It ensures that the data are accurate, consistent and uniformly entered. There are mainly two types of editing, that is field editing and central editing. Field editing is done by the enumerator or the person who have collected the data. It is a process of rewriting or translating the data that is recorded at the time of interview or at the time of collecting the data. Sometimes he may have written some codes or short forms, so such things have to be rewritten in the field editing. The central editing is done by the office. After the enumerator hand over the data into the office, he will do the central editing. If they entered in wrong places, it will be corrected. If so, for example, if we can say if the data has to be entered in years, it is represented in months, so it should be converted. In that way, the central editing will be done. The field editing is done by the enumerator or the person who collected data, and the central editing is done at the office level. The next stage is coding. Coding means assigning numbers or symbol to the data collected in order to differentiate it. Okay, for example, we can use different colors for different types of data, or short forms can be used, or numbers can be used. For example, we can use alphabets like G for gender, M for male and F for female. Like that we can use different types of coding. After coding, it is classification. Classification is done to arrange the data into homogeneous groups. While collecting the data will be in different forms and in different types. So these data are arranged or classified into homogeneous groups to form a meaningful relationship. The classification can be divided into different types, that is qualitative, quantitative, discrete and continuous. Qualitative means on the basis of qualitative informations or labels, and quantitative for example we can say the qualitative means taste, preference, etc., and the quantitative which can be represented in numerical form, and discrete which can be counted, and continuous like continuous scales, that is class in degrees. Saying about classification, classification can be done in symbol form or manifold classification. Symbol classification, we consider only one attribute. For example, we can say profit of last 5 years, that is symbol classification. But saying about manifold classification, we consider two or more attributes. For example, we can say sales of the different departments during the last 4 quarters. Then classification on the basis of class interval means, as we said, that we can represent the data in class interval also. For that we can use inclusive class or exclusive class. As you know, in inclusive class, the upper limit of first class will be included in that class itself. In this case we can look, the first class is 10 to 19. The 19 comes in the first class itself, 29 comes in the second class itself. But in the case of exclusive class, the upper limit of first class will be the lower limit of the next class. Here, the 20 will come in the next class. You have learned that in your previous classes. Okay, then here is the major different types of classes. It is the different types of classes are classifications. The classifications are mainly divided into 4, that is qualitative, quantitative, geographical and chronological. Saying about qualitative classification, as we said earlier, it is based on attributes, that is taste, preference, etc. The quantitatives on the basis of quantity that can be measured in quantitative forms. For example, income, then profit, like that. Geographical on the basis of area, we can do classification on the basis of area, rural area, urban area. That way we can do classification. And chronological on the basis of time, that is last year, this year, next year. In that way we can do chronological classification on the basis of time. The next step is tabulation. Tabulation is entering the data into rows and columns. It can be done by hands or using mechanical devices or electronic devices. As we said in the type of classification, tabulation can also be done in simple tabulation or in complex form. In simple tabulation, only one variable will be taken, where in complex tabulation, more than one variable will be taken. Here we have to look through the principles of classification and tabulation. Okay, saying about the principles of classification, as far as possible, the number of classes should be less, that is 5 to 15. Then it should be done in either 5 or in multiples of 5. The starting point may either be 0 or 5 or multiples of 5. That is, while classifying on the basis, we can use 5 or the multiples of 5s or 0. That is, first class like 0 to 10,000, next class like 10,000 to 20,000. In that way we can do classifications, or we can use the multiples of 5 also. It is better to adopt exclusive classification. As we discussed earlier, exclusive classification like 10 to 20, 20 to 30, it's better to adopt exclusive classification methods. And the interval should be equal for all classes. That means the class interval should be equal. Then only we can make a proper analysis of the data. If one class's interval is like this, 10 to 20, and the next come to 20 to 50, so there is no uniformity in the class interval, so it should be avoided. If possible, open-end classes should be avoided. You know that open-end classes means below 100, or we can say above 1000. So such classes should be avoided. We should have a limit for every classes. Okay, the principles of tabulation, we have to consider the size of the table. Okay, it's very important to consider the size, and we should include more rows than columns. The table should have a clear and brief and adequate title. And table number is very important. There should be a distinct number, and it is used for the reference also. The caption and steps, that is the headings given for columns and rows, should be arranged in a systematic manner. The table should be very clear, that there should be a proper clarity of the content and should be easy to read. Simplicity is another important principles of the tabulation. We should avoid unnecessary data, and the arrangement of data should be in a logical order. And saying about the heading, we should provide a clear and informative heading for the table. The table column headings and row heading should mention what is included in that row or in column. We should maintain proper consistency. For example, if you are using rupees, we should use rupees in every row. Then if you are representing the rupees in thousands, we should mention that in everywhere in thousands. And another way we can say, if we are representing percentage, we should mention that everywhere the percentage. Then only we can make a proper comparison. So consistency is very important. And also, while representing the numerical places, if you are taking 2 decimal points, it should be consistent for all the data. Footnote is another important principle of tabulation. Footnote is an explanatory note given below the table, which is giving an explanation for, or which is giving an additional context of the data involved in the table. And use of graphics. We should provide certain graphics or we should provide certain highlights to emphasize the important informations. Saying about the next principle, we should avoid the duplication and also ensure that the data in the table is accurate and consistent. Now we can look the what is the difference between classification and tabulation. As you know, classification includes grouping of similar data or homogeneous data into groups on the basis of certain characteristics. But saying about the tabulation is summarizing of the grouped data into rows and columns. Classification often present data in categories or classes, but tabulation do in structured format, that is in rows and columns. Classification aim to create order and make data more manageable, whereas the tabulation aim to provide a clear overview and facilitate analysis. Here we can look at example of classification. You see here we are classifying the birds in the first picture and the music genres. Then books on the basis of romance, science, mystery, etc. In that way we can do classification. Saying about tabulation, we can do tabulation of sales data, population statistics, survey results, etc. Briefly, we can say the difference between classification and tabulation as classification is done after data collection, whereas tabulation after data classification. Saying about classification, the collected data into different groups, classify the collected data into different groups, whereas the presentation present the classified data into tabular form. Okay, classification is a method of sorting of data, whereas tabulation is a method of presenting of the data. Saying about classification, it is arranged in variables and characteristics. But in tabulation, it is in a tabular form, that is in rows and columns. And in classification, divide data into categories and subcategories, whereas in tabulation, that divides data into headings and subheadings. So these are all about our classes. Thank you for watching.